Most people think war requires bombs and bullets. They are wrong. There is an organization without a single soldier that terrifies every nation on Earth. It doesn't declare war, yet it can collapse an entire economy with a single interest rate decision. This is the Federal Reserve. They told you it was created for financial reform. But the truth is far more sinister. In 1913, the elites of Wall Street, names like Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan, won a silent battle. They didn't just take the money, they took the right to print it. For over a century, the Fed has been the architect of crises, the financier of wars, and the distributor of a lethal poison called public debt. Is this stability? Or is it a global prison hidden in plain sight? Today we reveal how a group of unelected officials controls the world's heartbeat. Welcome to the invisible driver, the place for the truths society doesn't want you to know. Take a look at your grocery receipt from last week. Does it feel like a robbery? Because it is. In 2019, $100 could fill your cart with steak, organic greens, and enough fuel for a weekend getaway. Today, that same $100 barely covers a few bags of basics and a gallon of milk. You feel it every time you swipe your card. A nagging sense that despite your raises, despite your hard work, you're somehow falling behind. Most people call this inflation. I call it the silent thief in your wallet. Since the Fed was established in 1913, the US dollar has lost over 95% of its purchasing power. Every hour you spend working, every drop of sweat you pour into your career is being stored in a bucket that has been leaking for over a century. The lesson is simple, yet brutal. You cannot outwork a currency that is designed to melt. You are running on a treadmill that is slowly accelerating, while the floor beneath you is being pulled away. Your savings aren't just sitting there, they are evaporating. But here is the question they don't want you to ask. Why was this bucket designed to leak in the first place? To find the answer, we have to travel back to a secret meeting on a private island where the fate of your future was signed away. Long before you were even born. The Jekyll Island blueprint, a coup without guns. November 1910. A private rail car pulls out of a station in New Jersey, headed for a remote island off the coast of Georgia. On board are the very men who controlled the world's gold. The titans of Wall Street, representatives of Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, and the Rothschilds. To the public, these men were bitter rivals. But in the shadows of Jekyll Island, they were partners in a conspiracy. They didn't use last names, they didn't speak to the press. They spent 10 days in total isolation, drafting a plan to take over the American monetary system. Think about it. Imagine if today, the CEOs of the 5 biggest banks in America met in a secret bunker to write the laws that govern your bank account. You would call it a coup, because that is exactly what it was. A financial coup, without a single shot being fired. The lesson here is vital. True power doesn't live in the White House. It lives in the rooms where the rules are written. These men created a central bank that looked like a government agency, but functioned like a private cartel, a system designed by bankers for bankers. But their genius wasn't just in the creation of the Fed. It was in the mathematical trick they hid within the currency itself. A trick that ensures they always get the first bite of the apple, while you are left with the core. To understand how they are pulling the strings of your life today, you have to understand a phenomenon they hope you never discover. It's called the Cantillon Effect. The Cantillon Effect, why you're always last in line. Have you ever wondered why the stock market hits record highs while you are struggling to pay rent? It is not a coincidence. It is a mechanism called the Cantillon Effect. Think of the economy as a giant pond. When the Fed prints money, they do not drop it from helicopters onto your front yard. They pour it into the very center of the pond, where the big banks and giant corporations sit. These elites get the new money first, while prices are still low. They use it to buy up stocks, real estate, and assets, pushing their values even higher. By the time that money ripples out to the edges where you stand, the cost of everything has already skyrocketed. By the time you get your hands on that currency, its purchasing power has been drained. You are catching the dirty, expensive water at the edge of the pond. The lesson is this: in a world of infinite money printing, it is better to be close to the printer than to be a hard worker. Because when they print, they are not creating wealth, they are redistributing yours. But how do they keep you from walking away from this rigged game? They use a tool far more effective than any prison wall. They use your own future as a weapon against you. Let us talk about the invisible chains of debt. Number 4. Debt as a weapon. The modern indenture. Think about the first thing you did when you turned 18. Most likely, you were handed a pen and told to sign for a student loan or your first credit card. They called it an investment in your future. I call it the signing of your modern day indentured servitude contract. In the old days, people traded years of their lives for a plot of land. Today, the Fed and the banking system have convinced you to trade 30 years of your best, most creative hours for a house you can barely afford and a car that loses value the moment you drive it home. Why does the Fed love debt? Because a man in debt is a man who is predictable. If you owe the bank $5,000 a month, you cannot quit that soul-crushing job. You cannot start that business you've been dreaming of. You cannot protest the system. You are a cog locked into the machine by invisible chains of interest. The lesson is this: debt is not just a financial tool. It is a claim on your future time. Every dollar you borrow today is an hour of your life in 2030 that you have already sold to someone else. They have turned the American dream into a subscription service that you can never cancel. But here is the truly terrifying part. Even if you manage to stay out of debt, they have found a way to tax your very existence without ever passing a single law. Let us look at the most successful heist in human history: the theft of your time through the illusion of money. The invisible tax, stealing your time, not just your money. Most people think taxes are only what the IRS takes from your paycheck. They are wrong. There is a second tax, a silent one, that you never voted for, and you can never escape. It is called inflation. Think about this. When the Fed prints $1 trillion out of thin air, they are not creating new wealth. They are simply diluting the value of every dollar you have already earned. They are pouring water into the milk. They aren't just taking your currency. They are stealing your past. In the 1970s, the average American home cost about 2 times the annual salary of a single earner. Today, it takes 7, 8, or even 10 times that amount. That massive gap is the invisible tax. It represents 20 years of your life, 20 years of missed bedtimes, stressed Sundays, and extra shifts, just to afford the same 4 walls your grandfather bought with a high school diploma. The lesson is this: stop measuring your wealth in paper digits. Measure it in minutes. If you are working 40 hours a week but your money buys less than it did last year, the system is literally eating your life force. But as bad as this analog theft is, the elites have realized it has one flaw. You can still use cash. You can still hide your wealth in the physical world. To fix that, they are building the ultimate digital cage. One where every cent you own and every move you make is watched by a single, unblinking eye. Welcome to the end of privacy. Let us look at the digital panopticon. The digital panopticon, CBDCs, and the end of privacy. For centuries, cash was the last fortress of your privacy. When you spend a $20 bill, the government doesn't know if you bought a steak, a book, or gave it to a homeless man. But that fortress is being demolished. They call it the CBDC, or the central bank digital currency. Don't confuse this with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is about decentralization. CBDCs are about total, absolute control. Imagine a world where your money is programmable. If you buy too much red meat, your digital wallet might block your next purchase. To lower your carbon footprint, if you support a political candidate they don't like, your funds could be frozen with a single keystroke. No trial, no jury, just a line of code. This isn't science fiction. It is a digital panopticon, a prison where the walls are made of data and the guards are algorithms. The lesson here is chilling. If they control your ability to transact, they control your ability to exist. In this new era, money is no longer a tool for trade. It becomes a permission slip for life. But the walls of this cage are only closing in because we are still playing by their rules. We have spent this entire time looking at how they drive the car. It is time to stop being the passenger. It is time to take the wheel. Let us talk about the pivot. The pivot. Stop being the passenger if you are feeling overwhelmed. Good. That means you are finally paying attention. Most people will hear these truths and go right back to sleep. They will complain about the price of gas or wait for a politician to save them. But you are different. You are still here. And you realize that the cavalry isn't coming. The system is not broken. It is working exactly as intended. It was never meant to make you wealthy. It was meant to keep you productive, like a passenger in a car with no brakes. You have been staring out the window, hoping the driver knows where he is going. But the driver isn't your friend. The driver is a machine, fueled by your debt and your labor. The lesson is this: you cannot change the wind, but you can certainly adjust your sails. True freedom is not about having $1 million in a bank account that the Fed can devalue at will. It is about owning assets that they cannot print and developing skills that they cannot tax. It is time to stop being the passenger. It is time to become the driver, not the one they see, but the one they can never track. The invisible driver. But how do you actually exit the highway? What does the escape route look like in the real world? Let us build your blueprint for the great exit. The great exit. Assets versus illusions. The Fed wants you to store your life's work in 401ks, savings accounts, and government bonds. Why? Because those are the valves they control. They are illusions of wealth that can be devalued or frozen with a single policy change. To exit the highway, you must stop collecting illusions and start acquiring assets. Step 1. Kill the anchor. You cannot run toward freedom while dragging a ball and chain of high-interest debt. Every credit card balance you carry is a leak in your fortress. Plug the leaks first. Step 2. Move your energy into things they cannot print. Gold has outlived every empire in human history. Bitcoin provides a decentralized exit from the central bank. Real estate that produces cash flow gives you a roof and a revenue stream that doesn't depend on the value of a paper dollar. Think of these as your lifeboats. Step 3. Invest in the only asset they can never confiscate: your skill set. In an age of AI and automation, the ability to think critically, lead people, and solve complex problems is your ultimate weapon. They can take your bank account, but they can never take your mind. The lesson is this: wealth is not having a big number on a bank app. Wealth is having the autonomy to walk away from any table because you own your time and your tools. You are now building your fortress. But even the strongest walls won't save you if you don't see the storm coming. There is one final warning you need to hear, a signal that the breaking point is closer than you think. Let us look at the final countdown, the final warning, the breaking point. We are living in the final act of a 100-year experiment. For decades, the Fed has managed to keep the house of cards standing by printing more paper to pay off old debts. But math is a cruel master, and the math no longer adds up. Look at the US national debt. It is no longer just a number on a screen. It is a ticking timer. For the first time in history, the interest we pay on our debt has surpassed our entire defense budget. We are spending more on the ghost of past spending than on protecting our future. This is the breaking point. History shows us that empires don't collapse when they run out of bullets. They collapse when they run out of trust. When the world realizes that the dollar is backed by nothing but a promise from a bankrupt institution, the exit doors will get very small, very fast. The lesson is this: it is better to be a year too early than a day too late. The system won't give you a warning. It will simply stop working. You have the knowledge. You have the blueprint. Now you must have the courage to act. Because in the world of the invisible driver, the only person who can save you is the person looking back at you in the mirror. Freedom isn't free. It requires alertness. If you want to know how the top 1% is moving their money right now to survive the coming sovereign debt crisis, watch this next video. I will see you behind the wheel.